You said you escaped. Did you escape in 1938?
No, no. The war in the Soviet Union
Soviet
started in June 22nd, 1941.
1941, okay.
Yeah, the Germans attacked Russia in 4 o'clock in the morning that day. It was a Sunday.
Let me back you up just a little bit. Tell me a little bit about growing up.
Okay, I was born in Minsk. This was the capital of Belarus, now a separate state, but at that time it was part of the Soviet Union, one republic. And I was born in 1935.
You were born in 1935?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember pre-war period, not everything, of course, but many things. I was
Tell me
one.
about your family.
My father was, he was actually a carpenter, but he didn't succeed in his graduation because he was moved from one place to another. Unfortunately, he, like many other people in Russia, was a member of Communist Party, on ideological. He accepted all this idea. Later, he became the enemy of the system. Well, he went to the whole way from supporter to enemy.
So your father was actually Jewish and communist?
He was. He became member of the party in 1927.
Right.
I discussed this problem with him many times. He said the ideas was very good and he liked it.
You liked it?
At the beginning.
And how many children were in the family?
I was only one. And because he was a party member, they moved him from one place to another, and he couldn't graduate from university and work as a cabinet maker.
Tell me a little bit about your first. When did you start to discover that something was not quite right? Were you aware of what was happening?
You mean not right in the Soviet system?
With regards to the war. When did you start to discover that there was an actual plan to exterminate and annihilate the Jews?
Okay. Before the war, I actually didn't know anything about Germany. I don't remember. I really didn't understand. You see, I was 5, 6 years old to understand what the Nazi rule. No.
Were your parents?
I read newspapers because I could read Soviet communist newspaper. But probably I read about what happened in Germany, but I couldn't understand that. When the war started, and people were very agitated at that moment, and I remember one thing, what I did in the morning. I put everything what I had, was anti-gas mask in a big pouch. But it was for children, especially. I put it on. I put my toy pistol. I had a sword that I made by myself, and a toy rifle, and I have a cap from Russian Civil War. Everything I put on. And we had a woman, a Polish woman. He was like my babysitter. And she took me to the store, and I remember one woman came and said, now we will not be scared of Germans because we have somebody to defend us.
This was you at 5, 6 years old.
I realized that war is something very, very bad because at night, or really in the morning, I don't remember, the next day, we went to shelter. And the shelter was very close to us because we lived near the opera building, and under this building, there was many stories underground and shelters. We spent some time in the shelters, but Germans didn't bomb Minsk at that time, and only was alarms like siren started. Every 15, 20 minutes because the reconnaissance plane flew over, and my father went to his military unit in an hour. He was 35 years old at that time, and he went. But he was lucky because he asked his commander for a couple hours to do something with us. And I want to stress you one very important thing that many people don't know that many people in Minsk, I mean mostly Jewish people and other people, didn't realize what happened because many people, like 40 years old and older, they remembered Germans who came to this place in World War One. There was occupation for a very short period. And I remember what they said. There was a lot of people, they said, oh, we remember the Germans. They used to come to our house, and if a soldier, officer, look on something, oh, I like this item, I will take it. And that is all. They didn't curse people, didn't abuse people. And that is why nothing will happen. And many people didn't want to live because of that. And the second reason was that the Soviet propaganda was not very active against Nazi, even from the beginning.
Why do you think that was?
In the period between 1933 and 39, there was a big cooperation between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. It was trade and the cooperation in the military field and exchange of officers and so on. That is why the propaganda didn't work. There was one movie anti-Nazi, I don't remember exactly, a couple of pictures only, made in 39 and 38. 38 probably.
What do you remember the general feeling about the Germans were?
Let me finish a couple of words. And because in 1939 there was an agreement between Hitler and Stalin,
Right.
and a secret part, which name was agreement of friendship and border. This was the name of this agreement. And in accordance with this agreement, Germany took Poland in 39, the west part of Poland, and Russia took the east part of Poland. And there was no anti-Nazi propaganda at all. And the Soviet people, they were adjusted themselves to the situations, the life. They believed what newspapers and radio said, and newspaper printed, and there was no anti-Nazi propaganda. So what do we need to do? We will not do it. But not all people do the same way, because we left the city the next day, June 23rd, because my father got tickets on the train on the next day, and got sometimes in the middle of the day, like 12, I don't remember exactly now, so many years, and he came and said, now we will take everything what we can in a couple small suits and maybe bag and so on, and we'll go. And we went on foot. The distance was to railroad station was probably 2 miles, 2.5 miles, and we spent 5 hours to walk, because every 15 minutes the reconnaissance planes and siren started, and we tried to find the shelter in entrance and building entrances to wait, sometimes half an hour or so on. And finally, at 10 o'clock in the evening, we came to a railroad station, and it was a train, the passenger train, full of people. We entered the train, and there was no place where to sit, and nobody checked tickets. And finally, at about 10:30 or so, it was already dark. You know, the Minsk latitude is high, and it was June, and the day was very long. And when we started to move, probably in half an hour, it was dark, and we moved to the east. And in the morning, we passed 150 miles. And Germans moved very fast, unbelievably fast. I think it's faster than our troops now in Iraq. They moved 200 miles from Brest and on the border to Minsk, exactly 200 miles in a week.
You said this was in 1941.
It was in 1941.
You were 6 years old.
Yeah. And when we left, the next morning at 4 o'clock, they started bombing of the city. And city was built mostly from wood. It was the whole city burned. And
Left
people
6 hours
couldn't.
before the bombing.
Probably our train was the last. I think so. I'm not sure, but I think maybe the last. Because the next day, only people who had some kind of transportation. People didn't have cars in Russia. That only few people. But if you get some kind of truck, belong to some company or so, they could manage. Because what I know definitely that people who left the city on June 25th by foot, they came back. Because the Germans moved so fast. In June 28th, they were in Minsk.
I know you were only 6 years old,
Yeah.
but what did you think you were doing? Did you know what you were doing at the time? And
I
you were
understood
getting-
that we
you
were
getting on a plane or a train.
we were escaping
You were
from
escaping.
Germans. I understood what war is because when we started to move in this train, it was not very dark at that moment, and Russian anti-aircraft guns they was shooting for this reconnaissance.
Do you remember
German-
any conversations you had with your parents about it?
My father left that evening. He put us to the train and went to his military unit. And it was me, my mother, and a couple other relatives. What
you
we
see your
discussed,
father
all talking was about war because there were no other subject. And people didn't know what will happen to them. We came to the small town, 150 miles approximately from Minsk, the east, and we stayed there for 3 weeks, or maybe more than that, because the German advance slowed down. Because in Minsk area there was no defense at all. They moved as fast as they could. After that, there was some resistance, and they slowed down, and we lived for about a month in the city. My sister was born over there, in this, but she died later, 3 weeks later, because after that we started to move as the refugees. They didn't call us refugees. They didn't like that word. Because refugee in your own country,
What did they call you?
in Russian, evacuирован, it means the people who were under evacuated people, something like that. One
What
word.
did your sister die of?
As I remember, when she was born, she was pretty good. But when we started to move from this town, we moved in railroad cars for cargo. It was not passenger. I remember was inscription on the car was 40 people or 8 horses. You know? And they were overcrowded. Actually, as I remember, we didn't starve because we had some coupons that we could get some bread and maybe something else. And it was summertime, you could find something, potatoes. But the problem was the sanitation. You couldn't wash yourself. And my sister died because of some kind of disease. I don't know how to qualify it, but she was only 3 weeks old.
Do you remember?
And A little bit, and we moved for 3 months. We stopped in Voronezh area in August. It was in August, and spent probably about a month over there. And after that, we started to move to Asia, south east part of Russia. We came in the end, like in October, November, or something like that. We came close to Chinese border in Kazakhstan.
Do you remember the day of liberation?
Of my city,
Mm-hmm.
I know this day. At that time, it was July the 3rd of 1944.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was with my parents. My mother was very sick at that time because when we were in Kazakhstan, she got, what is it called? Typhus,
Mm-hmm.
very bad disease. And she couldn't recover from it. My father was in front, he was in Moscow area, was wounded 2 times or 3 times. Was in the hospital in 1943. After that, he got a new assignment to work in a hospital. And he came to Kazakhstan and took us. And the hospital was located near Moscow at that time. And moved, when Germans moved, we moved to West and hospital moved. And we moved with. And when Minsk was liberated in 1944, I was near Smolensk. Smolensk, the Russian city between Moscow and Minsk, approximately in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and this hospital was located there. And I remember that my mother, she was very, very sick and weak at that time, ill. And she said that I need to go to look what happened to the city. And 3 or 4 other people from Minsk, they got a car and they went and spent a day or so. It was, I don't remember exactly, July the 5th, or so, a couple days after liberation. And when she came back, she was absolutely devastated, and she died a couple of weeks later.
She died. Do you remember what she died of?
After this typhus, something. Well, maybe not because the whole body after this disease was different, weak and so on. Some consequences.
So at 10 years old.
She was 29 years old at that time, and I was in 44. I was 9.
10,
I was 9.
9. So by the age of 9, you had lost your mother and your sister.
Yeah, I lost sister in 41. I lost mother in 44. And I was lucky. I had father. My father died in 77.
Where did you go from there? Where did you and your father go after you lost your mother?
My father was in the military service up to 47. In 47, he left the army, and we came back to Minsk. And at that time, the city was in ruin. They started restore the first building they restored. It was a KGB building. You know what the KGB is? But he was in Minsk ghetto for 3 years and escaped. He told me a lot of things. He cannot be interviewed because he died about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I talked to him a lot, and my actual information that I have on this period in Minsk came from him.
I'll tell you what's really important to us in this project, and I like the fact that you have the information, is that we want to know about your story and what happened to you.
Oh, well, okay.
Just so you know that we
okay.
we welcome all information. We want to know. In this particular project, we want to know what happened to you.
Okay.
I want you to tell me a little bit about post-war. After you were with your father, what brought you? How long did you live? You went back to Soviet Union?
I was in Soviet Union. I was in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan was a part of Soviet
Okay,
Union.
so you
Yeah.
went back. You went back home.
Yeah,
Is what I'm
and I
trying to
was
remember.
for up to 1947. I was with my father in this hospital. They moved from one place to another, 5, 6 different changes, and finally in '47 we came back to Minsk, and the situation in Minsk was very, very bad. There was no place where to live, and at the beginning we lived. I remember that was like 9 people slept in one small room. Can you imagine that? Some people slept on the table, on the table.
And you remember that?
I remember that. I went to school, 5th grade. It was very hard because we couldn't buy clothes, and what I had, I could use for many, many years. But my father worked very hard. He was not very healthy man after this
Did you
wounds that
remember
I
the
have.
anti-Semitism?
Yes,
What do you
Yeah.
remember?
I will tell you. Very nice story, very interesting. I spent 4 months so in orphanage. It was at that time I have my father and my mother was alive, but the hospital moved close to front, and they didn't want me to be there. Stupid decision, and they put me in an orphanage near Moscow. In this place, it was about 150, 140, 150 boys, only boys. I was one of the youngest. And all of them, probably most of them, except of me, were orphans. The situation in this orphanage was very, very bad. Lack of food. And we were hungry. I remember that I used to walk around. If I found some peel from potatoes, I think, and raw. That's what. My father left a couple loaves of bread and asked lady to give me when I need. But everything was stolen. They used to steal food. But what was the worst? The attitude to me from these guys, other boys. They understood that I'm Jewish because in this country sometimes it's very hard to understand who is who. In Russia it was it is very easy. Your appearance, your name, and it was clear for them. And they humiliated me from the morning up to the night.
They humiliated you.
Yeah.
How?
Oh, many ways. I can explain you one. It's hard to understand for America. These anti-Semitic people, they had some impressions. And I don't know why it happens that Jewish people cannot pronounce sound R. Okay? And what they did, they used to ask me, say corn. Corn in Russian language, kukuruza. It means the Jewish people cannot pronounce it. And they will pronounce it not kukuruza, but kukuruza. And when somebody does it, this was a big fun for them. They didn't give me chance to sleep. If I wanted to write a letter, a postcard, I need to miss my school, not to go to school, and because they will not allow me to do that. And many, many other humiliations. And I remember what I said. I was so naive at that time. I was 9 years old. I said, I will complain. I will write complaint on you, and I will send this complaint to Stalin because it's
So how long did you live in the Soviet Union after the war?
We left the country in '79, and I was.
In 1979?
Yeah, I was 44 years old.
Mm-hmm. And did you come straight here to Tennessee?
Actually, straight, we spent some time in Italy, a couple months.
What brought you to Memphis?
Memphis, accidentally. I found a job.
You found a job?
Yeah.
And
You had a question why I left the Soviet Union. Okay, that's a good question. From 1948, as I remember, my family, my father, my uncle, were involved in some kind of personal activity, I don't know. We were listening foreign broadcasts. The reason for that was because we wanted to know what is going on in the world. And we didn't trust the Soviet system at all, and we hated this system. My uncle was arrested in 1950. I remember that day, exactly 3 days after the war in Korea started. The KGB people came and arrested him. And he spent 5 years in, you should know this word, Gulag, what is it? Concentration camp that Stalin and even Lenin created it. He spent 5 years, and he was lucky because Stalin died in 1953, and 2 years later he came back. And why he was arrested? I will tell you why. Because he was a chemist and worked in the factory with American equipment. Everything was American to make a penicillin drug, medicine. And with American help, this factory was erected in Minsk. And he said that American equipment is very good. Okay. But it was in 1948, 49, with all this campaign, the Cold War started, and this. But see, in Russia, many questions. I cannot spend much time on that. The KGB was everywhere. If you worked in some places, in a group of 3 people, one of them will be KGB informer. And you need to be very careful what you are talking about with. And my uncle was a very open-minded man, and he could say everything what he wanted. He was a free person. And this informants, the KGB, as they put it. Another thing he said before the war, Nazi Germany is very close, 200 miles, and they started to build aircraft factory. He said, "What is the stupid people? What they're doing?" This was. And another time he said, "Oh, if I would like to go to leave the country to go to Israel," somebody informed about that, and they came and they arrested him. In the family, 3 kids, small kids, were left and without any sources for survival.
when you think back about the war, especially the time that you were escaping with your parents or your mother, what do you remember the most?
What I remember the most from this period, I remember, first of all, the life in Kazakhstan. It was very hard. I remember that my mother wanted to go to work, to do something, but she was, before the war, she worked in an office of transportation. She graduated like something like a state tech here. But in this village that we lived, there was no work for her, and one time she went to the field, and in that field, it was probably 6-7 miles to walk in the field, and back, the same distance back, to pick up poppy.
So she walked 7 miles to pick up poppy?
Poppy,
14 miles.
The poppy, they use it for medical purpose, not as a drug.
No, right.
But she could do it only for one week. She was absolutely exhausted, and she could. This was very hard life. And I remember one thing, that we lived in one room with another family, a woman with a small boy, my age. She was from Kharkov. And this woman had flour, like a big bag of flour. We didn't have that. And one day she started to make some kind of rolls, baking, and left the room for a minute. And I said, "Oh, I need it." She didn't want to give me one. And I came, I picked up one, and the next moment she came back and became so angry. And I escaped, like it was a big stove. I jumped over and she wanted to catch me. And this is what I remember. But many people were good for us. Some people in this area, or even in Siberia, they never seen Jewish people at all.
Mm-hmm.
And there were many of them who, when they see Jews the first time, said, "Oh, we see normal people. We thought the Jewish people are different. They have horns."
Mm-hmm.
See?
So these people in the 1940s were still believing the old myths.
Or maybe some Orthodox,
Right.
religious people. They were,
What do you want people to know about what happened? When people say to you, how could this have happened?
what you mean, the Holocaust?
The Holocaust. What do you tell people? How do you explain it?
Why it happened and how?
Yeah. Well, people want to know, how did it happen? How could it happen? How could people systematically do it?
I will tell you this. As I understand, today is still a question, because it is so hard to answer the questions, and maybe even Elie Wiesel, the biggest specialist in Holocaust, will not be able to answer the question how this nation, I mean German nations, on the so high level of development, how they came to that. This is so abnormal that the normal people, like we cannot. Even me, see, I have this experience, and when I ask this question, how it could happen, I don't know.
I know you escaped. You know, we have a couple of survivors that escaped before Kristallnacht or before the invasion of their country. And the growing feeling during that time is guilt. Do you feel any guilt?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard question. The guilt? Maybe because maybe my father should feel some guilt, and I will explain you. Because his understanding of the situation was very, very good. And Russian propaganda couldn't make influence on him. He understood that the first step should be to save the family. Maybe he should do the same thing for other people. But on the other hand, he couldn't do it because he was 35 years old, and his military prescription was, when war starts, in 30 minutes or an hour, go to your military unit, and that is all. Because my guilt, say, I don't know, I was so small, But
Even now, though, looking back, you escaped, you were small, you didn't go to a camp, you weren't in a deportation. Is there a part of you that does wonder how?
You see, I was simply lucky. Statistically, if you look on everything mathematically, in the situations that I had probably 98% or 99% to become a victim. Mm-hmm. And only 1% to escape and 1% to survive.
So how do you explain the 1%? Luck?
Only luck, and maybe, I don't know. Because, see, look, if my father didn't have a chance to come and to pick up and put it in this train, will we leave the city? Probably not. Like most other people.
Luck? A little bit of faith, good
I
timing.
think this was a luck. Yeah. Well, people in Kiev, for example, when in Ukraine, they were in different situation because German came in Kiev probably 1.5 months or so later, and they had a chance to escape. And most of them didn't. And that is why they had Babi Yar when the 30, 50,000 Jews were murdered. Because the Soviet propaganda, and they didn't understand the reality and the situation. And on the other hand, the evacuation of people in Russia was organized so badly. Compare with what happened in Denmark,
Right.
you know, I will not explain.
How do we make sure this never happens again? What do you think?
Can it happen again?
No, what do you think will keep it from happening again?
I will tell you one thing. If we are vigilant enough, and I mean not only the simple people, but on the governmental level. Look what is going on in France now. This country and some other European countries, they don't want to fight terrorism. The main threat today is from terrorism. I don't need to explain you, because you understand that.
Right.
And we need to realize the situation and to use all our experience and to do everything that the words that we used for many years and decades, never again. With a big and deep sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, after what we had in 9/11, can we use it anymore? I don't know. We have it. And probably we will have something else. We don't have any guarantee that tomorrow some terrorist will something unpredictable. We need to fight terrorism any place in the world. Because there is no difference between Nazi Germany and their ideology and the ideology of Islam-Nazism, what I call it. It is the same thing. But many people don't understand that, and they don't want to understand that. And this is what makes me very upset. But I will not go deeper because you know what I'm talking about, and we don't have big time for that. But we need to work hard, and what you are doing, I think, is very important. We need to combine this, what happened 50, 60 years ago, and what is going on today, and can happen in the near future. That is why actually we're doing that, to prevent such things in the future.
When people talk about the Holocaust, some people say it's hate, some people say it was evil, some people say they have no idea what it was. Do you?
Evil. See, I think that evil exists, really exists, and we have many examples of that. Can we eradicate evil? I don't know. But we need to work into it.
Thank you. It's been an honor to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much. It was nice to talk to you.
It's been very important to us, and we appreciate that.
And I had an opportunity to talk in
I'm glad.
English because my Russian is still better than